Chapter 11 is on antitrust law. And before we kind of dive into the law, I need to go over a little bit of terminology here. If you haven't taken Business 110, and there are no prerequisites for this class, so some of you may have had this, some of you not, and I just want to go over it real quick. A monopoly is a market structure where one producer completely dominates the industry, leaving no room for any significant competitors. And the barriers to entry tend to be virtually insurmountable. So that's the book definition. Basically, what a monopoly is that it's one business that has everybody. There's no competitors, and if there was a competitor, to try to get into the market would be so expensive they wouldn't be able to do it. So the best example I can give of a monopoly is your local electric company. Think about whether you're on Duke Power or Energy United or maybe some other power provider. Imagine if every time somebody moved in or moved out, or you got mad with, let's say, Duke, you decided that you wanted to go with Energy United. So you would call Duke and they would have to rip all the lines out, and somehow or another, Energy United would have to figure out a way to serve you. And that's just not going to work. They have a monopoly, but they are also regulated by the federal government and by state government to keep them from overcharging you. But that is a monopoly. When you move in, when your parents moved in, there was only one company where they could get power. So that's a monopoly. And when I say that the barriers to entry, imagine having to build all of those lines to serve you, or build a new power plant to serve you. That's what they mean by the barriers to entry are high. A cartel is the textbook definition: an association of manufacturers or suppliers with the purpose of maintaining prices at a high level and restricting competition. A famous cartel is OPEC, oil producing, I should have looked this up, but it's oil producing, and it's a cartel. They set prices. Sometimes the prices are artificially high, and they allow only certain members in. So OPEC is a famous cartel. You also may hear this word in reference to the drug lords in Mexico. Those are what they call cartels. Now that's a kind of a underhanded word for cartel, but they are cartels. They're maintaining prices at a high level and restricting competition. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows what a monopoly is and what a cartel is. So the purpose of antitrust law: lower prices, more products, and a more equal distribution of wealth. Equal opportunity for consumers and businesses, to prevent unfair trade restrictions, to prevent unlawful mergers and business practices that lead to a restraint of trade. So one of the important distinctions I want to make between antitrust law and unfair business practices is antitrust law specifically looks at people becoming a monopoly or a cartel. So one of the very first laws prohibiting this was the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. So these laws have been around a while. Lots of events following the Civil War led to cartels and trusts, and your book goes into some of the basic history. I'm not going to go over it again. If you're interested, read it. But this is the granddaddy of all the antitrust laws. This is a criminal statute. Now, if you will remember, civil and criminal. Civil is in civil court, which is basically all about money, but there's no finding of guilt. It's all about who is responsible. All of the tort laws are in civil court. Criminal court is where you are found guilty and you either go to jail or you have to pay fines. So the Sherman Antitrust Act is a criminal statute, and it has some teeth in it. It's a $100 million fine and up to 10 years in prison, or $1 million for individuals that are convicted of this. And this law prohibits basically mergers or anything else that would restrict trade. The Clayton Act of 1914 is a civil statute. It makes something illegal but not criminal, which is very odd. So even though it's illegal, it doesn't mean that you're going to jail for it. It means that if it's illegal, you can go to civil court and get remedies that way. And civil court basically means money, if you remember from the tort lecture. So the Clayton Act prohibits 4 different things. Price discrimination. So that's buying the same product, but different buyers at different prices. So let me give you an example. Let's say that I walk into Walmart, I see a shirt, I like it, I buy it, it's $20. Somebody else, let's just say another instructor, pick a name, doesn't matter, walks into Walmart, buys the same shirt, but pays $15 for it. That's price discrimination. Now, that doesn't mean that things are on sale, okay? That means the same product, different people. So it has to be the same product. There's not a lot of this that I know of, maybe in some other businesses, but price discrimination is the same product, but different buyers at different prices. Exclusivity contracts mean that you can only buy from one business and not competitors. And there used to be a lot of this going on. So let's say that, well, there's still a little bit of this going on. If you go to a restaurant, they sell only Pepsi or only Coke. That's an exclusivity contract. I don't know how they get around it. There's probably some small print. But basically, you can only purchase from one business and not competitors. So let me put this in terms that you could understand. Let's say that you're attending Mitchell Community College and you decide, or we decide, that the only place you can buy your textbook is from the bookstore. You can't go to Chegg. You can't go to Amazon. The only way we will allow you to attend Mitchell is if you sign a contract saying that you will buy your textbooks from the bookstore. That would be an exclusivity contract, and that would be illegal. Mitchell would get into a lot of trouble, and you could turn around and basically sue us under the Clayton Act. That's why we don't do it. So this Clayton Act bars exclusivity contracts that says you can only buy from us and no one else. Corporate mergers which result in acquisition of competing companies. So lest you think that this doesn't have any place in today, I believe it was Verizon trying to buy T-Mobile. I think that's the way it was. I don't think it was T-Mobile buying Verizon, but I may be wrong. But the Federal Trade Commission stopped that because that would be competing companies combining, and the Federal Trade Commission said they had too much of the market, and that would make that new company with the mergers almost a monopoly. So this happens more than you realize. I have a link down there at the bottom of the page. I pulled this up today, which is Monday. Temu is suing Shine over antitrust laws in the United States. That is today. So this still goes on a lot. Now, the last thing that the Clayton Act of 1914 prohibits is something called interlocking directorates. Big fancy words. All it means is that the board of directors on one company is also the same board of directors on a competing company. So you have members on both boards that are in competition. And basically, you can't do that. You have a conflict of interest. So let's say that you were on the board of Coke and also on the board of directors of Pepsi. That's a conflict of interest, and the Clayton Act prohibited this. The Clayton Act was amended in 1976 and requires companies that are planning on large mergers to notify the government and seek authorization. So when I was telling you about T-Mobile and Verizon, and I'm pretty sure that's right, they went to the government and the government said, no, we're not going to allow it. So, and there have been other mergers in the past or planned mergers where the Federal Trade Commission or the FTC has said, no, if you merge, you're going to directly restrain trade. The Federal Trade Commission Act of 1914, which I have referenced quite a bit here, if it violates the Sherman Act, it also violates the Federal Trade Commission. What this act did was, in addition to all of the antitrust laws, it kind of fills in the gap on unfair trade practices. And we're going to talk about unfair trade practices in a different chapter. And the Federal Trade Commission has a lot to do with unfair trade practices, but it does have a lot to do with antitrust laws. So to wrap this all up, antitrust laws at its heart stop monopolies. That's what they were designed for. It's designed so that both businesses and consumers get a fair shake. So businesses that compete, it's designed so that a larger competitor can't unfairly try to knock another competitor out. Now, it does not prevent fair competition. It prevents unfair competition. And I think that in a nutshell, it's a way for our economy to get lower prices and more products, because more companies that are competing fairly contribute to a more robust market. So if you have any questions, let me know. And we'll talk about unfair trade practices later. Thanks. Bye.